Welcome to the Deception Bay RSL sub-branch Centenary Armistice Concert, Anthems and Reflections. Thanks to all of the hard work of many volunteers, this is a magnificent way in which to pay tribute to our forebears 100 years ago and all that they had given, but also everything that has been given since, and what the centenary of the armistice means to us as Australians living in our modern 21st century world. There are many ways to stimulate the imaginative capacity in all of us to see the world through the eyes of others. In this case, music, magnificently written and performed, to take us back over the journey of a century. We are all Australians, but we are defined less by our constitution and the machinery of a democracy given us by the British than we are by our values and our beliefs, the way we relate to one another and see our place in the world. We are shaped most by our triumphs and our failures, our heroes and our villains, the way as a people we have faced adversity, and how we will face the inevitable adversities that are coming and respond to emerging unseen and increasingly threatening horizons. We were a young nation, 4.5 million people. 1 million young men were of an age that could volunteer, and twice our nation said no to conscription in referenda. Of the 417,000 that did, we sent 330,000 overseas. And then we emerged 100 years ago, joyous, victorious, but inconsolably mourning 62,000 dead. We then lived with another 60,000 who would die within a decade of returning. There is no event that so deeply wounded, divided, scarred, and then ultimately defined us as Australians than that of the First World War. We emerged also in the end with a greater belief in ourselves and a deeper understanding of what it means to be an Australian. Charles Bean, the official First World War correspondent who'd landed with the troops on Gallipoli on the 25th of April, stayed with them at the front through the entire war, realised more than anybody else that what he was seeing was an emerging Australian character. He was absorbing it, and he realised in the end that it's what Henry Lawson described as mateship, this spirit that binds us in the face of adversity, no matter what we face as men and women, to be sustained by belief in ourselves and in one another. And on the day of the armistice, 100 years ago, Bean doesn't sit in a tent drinking champagne with officers. He goes to Fromelles, he gets in a car, he goes to the place in France where we had our worst day ever. 5,533 Australian casualties, 1,917 dead. 100 years ago, he wanted to be with these men. He wanted to reflect. He wanted to be with these men who had dreamt of this day that they would never see, but for which they had given their lives. He wrote in his diary, "Across the old no man's land lay the skulls, the bones and the tattered uniforms of our men." And of this event 100 years ago, he wrote, "It's over. The enormous effort of the men, yes, and the women and the children is finally finished. We are free to be happy again." And he concluded by saying, 60,000 young Australians have given their lives to buy us that happiness. So as we commemorate, as we reflect, the best way, particularly to the young people present, to honour them is the way you choose to live your lives and shape our nation. The legacy that we have been given is that a life of value is one spent in the service of others, and to do everything we possibly can every single day to ask ourselves if we continue to be a people worthy of such sacrifices. The 2 million Australian men and women who wear and who have worn the uniform of the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force have given more and worked harder to shape that sense of being Australian than any other group that I can possibly nominate. Have a wonderful concert. Thank you for doing it, and thank you for making us proud to be Australians.